This is the AM News, and my name is Kimini Nyamani Amana. Pupils in over 50 basic schools in the Central Regional Capital, Cape Coast, are not getting any printed questions for their promotional exams. Instead, the teachers are having to write the questions on the board while the pupils take turns in batches for the exams. School authorities explain they are unable to finance the printing of exam papers due to the delay in the release of the capitation grant.
The capitation grant, introduced by government, sought to relieve parents and guardians the burden of paying the numerous levies that hitherto would have been charged by school authorities. The grant, which covers examination fee, teaching and learning materials, among others, according to the school's heads who spoke to Joy News off camera, has delayed for about 3 quarters. Although the conference of the heads of basic schools met parents to find a solution to the problem, they could not come to an agreement. The parents are said to have refused to pay, insisting the problem has to be resolved by government. Teachers who spoke to Joy News on condition of anonymity were not happy writing exam questions on the board and hoped government would attach importance to education and provide their needs.
Well, Foreign Minister Hannah Tete has justified government's decision to endorse the signing of the Economic Partnership Agreement with the European Union.
And we're talking about the non-traditional export sector, the tuna exports, because we are one of the largest tuna exporting countries in Africa. We are talking about the export of horticultural products. We are talking additionally about the export of processed cocoa products, because without an EPA, those products will not be competitive in the European market. And we are talking about an accumulation of smaller industrial products that now have the capacity to grow, again because of the certainty of market access. But it doesn't prevent us from continuing with integrating under ECOWAS, because the MFN clause that we negotiated says that whatever preferences we give to ourselves within Africa, which means the whole ECOWAS region and the establishment of our continental free trade area, and the ACP group, do not have to be granted to the European Union.
She also mentioned one of the surest ways to improve the export of local produce is to agree with traditional leaders to let go of lands for mass agricultural production.
In order to be able to increase agricultural production, which is key to being able to develop agro-processing, we need to have a serious conversation with traditional authorities as to how we deal with the question of access to land. Because without doing that, we are not going to be able to have the supporting raw material production to support industry, to be able to produce competitively, to have the export-led growth that we want to have.
2 other speakers at the forum, former Ministers of Trade and Industry, Alan Shermanting and Dr. Kofi Konadu Apreku, both preferred solutions on how Ghana's economy can be salvaged.
There is the issue of financing our exports and the industrial sector, including the agricultural sector. While several important issues in the trade policy must be implemented, I still believe that the issue of financing our exports remains very critical and important in building a vibrant and sustainable external sector, export sector, and creating jobs for our people, reducing poverty, and restoring macroeconomic stability. As Minister of Trade and Industry, I propose the setting up of a Ghana Export and Investment Bank, a bank that would have the primary responsibility for financing and promoting our nation's exports.
I think that first what we need to do is to put an export-led growth strategy at the center of our national development agenda. If that is not at the center of your national development agenda, there's obviously no way that you focus on it. And I'm not sure, I may be wrong, I'm not sure that that has been dealt with clarity, that we want to pursue an export-led growth strategy. We've talked about it, and we see elements of it in our national development agenda. But obviously, I don't think that's what we are pursuing.
Minister for Trade and Industry Haruna Idrisu, however, assured all hope is not lost as government is making efforts to address export concerns.
Today, Blue Skies is probably even importing pineapple from a foreign country in order to process it for exports into a foreign market. It explains how low we have failed to take advantage of our commercial agricultural opportunities as a country. And I'm sure my predecessors, ministers, whether Dr. Kunedu Apreku or Alan Chimenting, or my immediate past predecessor, and I'm not saying this to flatter her, in my informal discussions about the future of exports, one of the early whispers I got from Minister Hanatete was, Haruna, take a particular look at the EDIFT Act and see whether a review of it will not allow for us to be able to support more of exports into the future. Government has accordingly revised the EDIFT legislation and is now more friendly in terms of expanded credit to the Ghanaian private sector.
Fidelity Bank Ghana, sponsors of the dialogue, launched an export bonus account to assist local firms maximize their output and exports.
Well, now President Mahama has announced the full list of ministerial positions. A release issued from the Flagstaff House said the President had nominated a former Chief Executive of the Commonwealth Telecommunication Organization, Ekospio Gabra, as Minister of Trade and Industry. That means he takes over from Haruna Idrisu, who has been moved to the Ministry of Employment and Labour Relations. The statement says the President had also appointed Dr. Benjamin Kumbo, who is currently Minister of State in charge of Government Business in Parliament, as the new Minister of Defence, and he takes over from Mark Woyongo, who's also been assigned to the Minister of the Interior. Alhaji Inusa Fuseni moves from the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources to the Ministry of Roads and Highways. According to the statements, under the new realigned government structure, the Ministry of Communications will now be responsible for the Ministry of Media and Media Relations and Information, and functions of that ministry would now be put under the Ministry of Communications, as it was prior to the year 2001. Let's move on to some other stories now. Social media has moved from being a platform for just entertainment to that which many would describe as avenue for serious business. All the major financial institutions around the world, such as JP Morgan and the US Federal Reserve, are all on Twitter and Facebook. But Governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Kofi Wampa, says his institution is not ready to be on such platforms.
I don't think I'll ever go on social media. We'll do it when we stabilize the economy, when the economy is stable. Because if I go there, the number of insults, you know, these days I don't listen to your radio, because I hear that every day I've been insulted and so on. So if I listen, I'll probably not be able to sleep. So I don't listen. So if I go on that social media, I don't know the number of insults that I will get, and cartoons that graphic will make of me. The other day I saw a cartoon, I wasn't sure it was me. But when I looked closely, I think it was me the way. But maybe it's something, I hear that a lot of institutions are going that way, because it also promotes transparency and so on. It's something we will study and see whether it will be a good idea to do that. We will not follow blindly, but we would study the context of our economy, of our system, and see whether it's something that will benefit us.
The rail workers say they will go ahead with a planned strike despite closed-door meetings with officials of the Ministry of Transport and the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission to get them back to back down. The workers are threatening to shut down the 2 passenger shuttles serving Accra by July 21 over unfulfilled promises to revamp the rail service and poor remuneration. The meeting was attended by the Deputy Minister for Transport, Chief Director of the Ministry, and the Chief Executive Officer of the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission.
The union said a letter dated May 22nd from the Office of the President, signed by the Chief of Staff, indicated that President John Dramani Mahama had directed the Transport Ministry to ensure the implementation of the Workers' Salary Review by the Fair Wages and Salary Commission.
In fact, it's nothing to write home about. As I'm speaking to you now, the Managing Director, the overall boss, basic salary is 983 before the deduction of the Senate and income tax. A labourer in railway is taking home 163 Ghana before you deduct the Senate and the income tax. I'm telling you on authority that railway workers borrow. We have tend to be a virtual beggars in society. We borrow before we eat. We are owing so many banks in the country.
However, the chairman of the union added, since the president's directive, there had been no response and that the workers could not cope with the current economic challenges and called for immediate action to address the low level of salaries.
Now the Deputy Minister, the Chief Director of the Ministry of Transport, Dr. Graham of Fair Wages, we met him and they were trying to, in fact, persuade us to have patience. But the workers are saying that the patient, they have waited for a lot. They have patience for a lot since 2012. I've mentioned our salary figures to you. It's nothing to write home. We all go to the market and we know what the market is saying. So we beg you, we can't do anything unless the government do something about our salary review before Friday. The workers have mandated the union leaders and we have advised all concerned. Whatever we're supposed to done as law-abiding Ghanaians, we have done it. We have advised the ministry, we have advised Labour Commission, we have advised the Managing Director or the management of Ghana Railways. We are going to withdraw our service, if God permit, on Monday.
The withdrawal would affect the 2 passenger trains from Accra to Nsawam and Accra to Tema. Justice Kwesi Forson's report for Joy News.
Now, the electricity company of Ghana is collaborating with a Swedish company to produce 1,000 megawatts of power using the environmentally friendly tidal wave technology. To this end, the Swedish company would utilize the exceptionally strong tides at the Ada estuary by placing a hydropower plant under the sea so as to convert the energy of the tide into power, the ECG announced over the weekend. Manager of ECG Training School, George Mafu, who announced this during a workshop for journalists on the operations of the company, said the move was part of the ECG's commitment to engage power producers to generate adequate amount of electricity for distribution to customers. It is disclosed that the Swedish company, which signed an agreement with the ECG last week, would by December generate 5 megawatts of power and would periodically upgrade its generation capacity by 200 megawatts until it reaches the intended 1,000 megawatts by 2016. Judge Mafu said, owing to the growing demand for power, the initiative would ensure adequate power for businesses and domestic use. He said the technology to be employed by the company has been deployed successfully in Peru, where the tides are not as strong as that of the Ada estuary. Well, just before I go, take you through the ministerial appointments again. President John Mahama announced a full list of ministerial positions, and it comes with the appointment or nomination of former Chief Executive of the Commonwealth Telecommunications Organization, Ekospio Gabra, as Minister of Trade and Industry, taking over from Haruna Idrisu, who's been moved to the Ministry of Employment and Labour Relations. Dr. Benjamin Kumbo, who is currently Minister of State responsible for government business in Parliament, has been nominated as the new Minister for Defense to replace Mark Woyongo. Mark Woyongo has been moved to the Ministry of the Interior. Haji Inusef Hussein, Minister of Trade moves, no, Alhaji Inusa Husseini moves from the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources to Ministry of Roads and Highways. We'll bring you more in subsequent broadcasts. My name is Kemini Nyamani Amana. Have a good morning.